Welcome to week 5. This week's topic is the progressive movement. The progressive movement lasted in the United States roughly 1900 to 1920. It's not super well known. If you haven't taken the history class before, you probably won't recognize it, but it is super important. The progressive movement changes a lot of things in 1910, 1920, and so we had the progressive movement to thank for things like direct election of senators and for women voting and that kind of thing. So it is very important. Now, that being said, before we talk about progressivism, let's talk about what you need to be doing this week. First off, watch this video for a good recap. Second, look at chapter 21 in the textbook. That will tell you all about the progressive movement. Third, look at the PowerPoint on progressivism that I put up on Talon. And number 4, as always, make sure that you look at the discussion board and finish that up. Now, the progressive movement. The progressive movement really has its roots in the Industrial Revolution. When the Industrial Revolution started hitting in the 1880s and the 1890s, a lot of things changed. And one of the things that changed is the cities started to fill up, and very rapidly. And not only were the cities becoming kind of crowded, but a lot of the jobs that the people in the cities were taking were not that well paying. They had this idea that I will move to the city and life will be great and I'll have a job. And odds were they could find a job, but that job probably was not very well paying, and they may have been living in poverty ever since. And you look at the problems that they had with corruption in the government, and you look at the problem that they had with monopolies or trust busting. And all of those problems came up in the 1880s and the 1890s. And so, by around 1900, there were a lot of people who were wanting to change things, wanting to make things better. And that's why this movement has the name the progressive movement. Notice progress is the root word there. And the best way that I can describe the progressive movement is it's optimism. It's this belief that if we see a problem, if we sit down and we think about it and we come up with a logical way to fix that problem, we will, and we can make the world a better place. All you had to do was sit down and think about it and work at it. That's why the progressive movement really doesn't focus on one specific problem or one specific part of society, because as in any time period, there were a lot of problems that needed to be solved or tackled, and in the progressive movement, they tried to tackle them all. That's why you see movements for things like direct election of senators. They felt as though if your state legislatures were deciding who were going to be the 2 senators from your state in Washington, D.C., that was a very easy election. And not only that, but it would be very easy to corrupt people. You know, you've got 100 people in the state legislature. How hard is it to bribe 51 of them, right? Whereas if the whole state is voting, well then, the corruption is a lot less, or it's at least a lot harder to buy some of those elections. Women get the right to vote by 1920. That was another one of the amendments that came about. Part of this movement for more democracy. Let's vote on more things. Let's have more people voting. Let's have more of a say. Can't say I argue with that. One of the other issues that they tackle is monopoly busting or trust busting. And if you look in the textbook or in the PowerPoint, you will see some of the specific acts and some of the specific things that the government tried to do in order to solve that problem as well and to get rid of them. Honestly, it's a hard thing to do, and I think they'll find that. One of the other things that they were working for was workplace safety. Excuse me. And think about that. If you remember back to the chapters on the Industrial Revolution, the working conditions were awful. And that's why unions sprang up all over the place. And so now they're talking about workplace safety and things like that. After the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire, where a lot of people died in that factory because they couldn't get out, they really started looking at things like that. Also, think about this. They are looking at prohibition. We need to get rid of alcohol. The point was that it will solve a lot of problems. Maybe it'll help alleviate poverty. Maybe there'll be less crime. So they were looking at that as well, and they got an amendment passed that, yes, prohibition will be a thing in the United States. We won't sell alcohol. So really, a lot of change, a lot of movement, a lot of effort to try to make things better or as good as possible. Now, the three progressive presidents are Teddy Roosevelt, and he was president 1901 to 1909. William Howard Taft, 1909 to 1913, and Woodrow Wilson. Now, the election in 1912 saw all three of those people running. What happened is Teddy Roosevelt served 2 terms, 1901 to 1909, and then he stepped down. He wouldn't have had to have, because the rule about only serving 2 terms wasn't there yet. He wouldn't have had to have stepped down, but he chose to. William Howard Taft became president after Teddy Roosevelt, and when the election of 1912 came around, Teddy Roosevelt decided he still wanted to be president. So he ran again, and you end up with all 3 candidates running. Now, Woodrow Wilson, the Democrat, wins, and that is a big deal because there hadn't been very many Democrat presidents since the Civil War. And part of the reason why President Wilson won is because Roosevelt ran. The Republicans split their vote between Roosevelt and Taft, and Wilson was kind of able to sneak in. All right. That's sort of a brief overview of the progressive movement. Make sure you look in your chapter, in chapter 21, for more detail. And as always, if you have any questions, please let me know. Happy history.